So I'm living in California with my mother. My parents have been divorced, and I'm staying we're living in Richmond, California. I'm 10 years old, and go to bed one night like every night, and sometime early morning, I hear a pounding on the door. And I'm laying there, and I'm thinking, well, what's going on? So I keep hearing pounding. I get up out of bed. I go running into the front room, and the lights are on, and my mother's laying there on the couch, snoring. And what I'm seeing is a lot of blood. So I open up the front door, and these men come in, the police and some other person. And 10 years old, I'm trying to process all this stuff, but all this goes down in about 1 minute. You know, it was a kind of a blur. Some things were happening. I just didn't understand what was happening. I saw what had happened. But my mother was snoring at the time, but on the way to the hospital, apparently she did pass away. It was a self-inflicted gun wound to the head. Next thing I can remember is that I'm going with my dad. I'm just gonna stay with my father. So I moved in with my father. He came and picked me up and took care of me, and I stayed in Northern California with his former wife. He had remarried, so I was with Burl and himself. And about 4 years later, my dad went into the VA hospital. He was a war vet, and he ended up not coming home. He contracted pneumonia while in the hospital, and that killed him. So I stayed with Burl, my dad's wife, and she took care of me for maybe 5 or 6 months. She passed away. And so at that point, I was living with her mother in the same house, Grandma. And I was there for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and my cousins finally had come up from Southern California and picked me up and said, Eddie, you're gonna come live with us. So my stepmom and my cousin Dawn and my stepmom Barbara were raising all these kids. I stayed with them until I graduated high school. I moved down to San Diego, but that very year, Barbara, she had gotten breast cancer, and she passed away. She died. You know, even before that happened, I started wondering as a kid, because I was trying to process this whole thing, from my mother killing herself to now Barbara, and I have been trying to figure out what's going on here. Am I bad luck? Maybe, you know, I just felt that way. I felt, you know, pretty mixed up. I was pretty unsure of what's happening. At that point, I got an opportunity to move to Kauai. I had a cousin over here that had been here since the late 70s, and her husband offered to have me come up and stay with them in Waimea. You know, I was enjoying life, working. I started up this painting business after the hurricane of Eva, and I was kind of being pursued a little bit by a few people that were Christians over here. One was Mike Wellman. He shaped me a couple boards, and of course he was talking to me about Christ, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty compelling, and I was interested. And I ended up meeting a local girl over here, Roxanne, in 1983, and we ended up getting married. So one morning I wake up, go to work, 9 o'clock in the morning. This is 1986. 1986, I get a phone call in my car, in my van. It's hospice. A lady named Gina calls me from hospice. She goes, hey, are you at Speyer? And I go, yes. And she goes, well, your wife or your ex-wife has had a bad accident. Could you come down to the hospital right away, down to Wilcox? And I said, yeah. You know, of course, I got this really cold feeling. I didn't know what was going on. She didn't say anything about death or anything, so I go driving right down to the hospital. Gina meets me there from hospice, and she starts to explain to me what's happened. There was an accident outside the tree top. So I said, oh, so where is she? And she goes, well, she's in that room, but she's deceased. And at that point, I realized, okay, I gotta start thinking differently. This is really a big life change, and I just knew I had to get right with God. I knew I had to go to church, and there was just no question about what church I was going to go to. Because I knew the people down here, and I knew a lot about you guys through surfing and through your belief. And so I started bringing the kids to church, and that was in '96, I think, at the end of '96. So as I'm going to church, I'm seeing a whole different side of life. I'm seeing the wisdom, what the Bible talks about. I'm seeing all these different people in the Bible, a lot of different stories. And I'm starting to put something together for myself, because I've been trying to make sense of, why has this happened to me? Well, what's going on in my life? It was just unexplainable. I couldn't, especially when Roxanne was killed in the car wreck. I mean, why did that happen? So I started questioning God. Why did this happen? So all these questions started coming up, and I was really searching. I was searching for an answer. And sometimes you don't always find an answer, but you find comfort. There's always hope. There's hope. If you're a believer, there's no reason to give up, because God is going to be there for you no matter what. I've had my times or my doubts, and I've had hard times. In fact, I don't know why I haven't turned into a serial killer or a drug-induced drinker that just ends up killing himself. I don't know why that's happened, but for people that are having a hard time, I have a lot of empathy for you, whatever you have to go to soften the pain. But in the end, as believers, you got to look towards your brother and your sister when they come to you. Listen to them. Talk about your story. I've only told this story maybe 5 times in my life, but it's been therapeutic for me to say that. It seems really crazy. I mean, how could a guy go through all this stuff? And even I look at myself sometimes and I'm going like, is this for real? What is the plan here? I'm 63 and I still don't know what the plan is. Although that God loves me and I'm in a good place and He's always taking care of me. And there's that hope. There's that hope for every person that's out there, no matter what they've been through. Just never give up and have faith.